Hello, and welcome to Beery Good Entertainment, episode 48. This is a politics and controversy episode in which we will be talking to a candidate for local office here in Corvallis, Oregon. We're holding a general election this year on November 6th. We hope you enjoy getting to know something about the people who have a bit more of a direct influence on your daily lives. Just a reminder, this is not a debate, it's just a discussion. In this episode, we are talking to Andrew Freborg, candidate for City Council, Ward 9. Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Oh, it's been a long week, but I enjoy the work, so it's good.
Long week, and it's only Wednesday.
That's right, Wednesday. Let's start out by just a little bit about you personally.
Okay, like just kind of my bio, my history sort of thing?
Yeah. Where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from somewhere down south that we don't like to talk about up here. But in my defense, I moved here about 2 weeks before my 9th birthday. I've lived here pretty much ever since, with the exception of a couple of months in Harrisburg and a couple of months in Philomath. Grew up here, went to high school here, have a degree in speech communication with a minor in political science from Western Oregon University, and just got to the point, I've worked here, lived here, and it's time for me to give back to the community that's given me everything.
Fantastic. And I see you have a beer.
Yes, I do have.
What are you drinking today?
I am drinking the Mazama Brewing Belgian Style Blonde.
Oh my goodness, I love Mazama's Belgians like no tomorrow.
This is really good. I love it. It's not too heavy, not too light. You're drinking a beer, but you're not going to get the bitter beer face or have to chew it.
And it's really good for like a middle of the day beer. It really is.
Exactly. It's a great 3 o'clock beer. I
have Pyramid's Thunderhead IPA. This is a 6.7% IPA. And I know recently I haven't been doing a lot of IPAs. I'm sorry, audience, but it is fall and I've been delving into the dark beers. But here you go for you IPA lovers. Beautiful, golden, dependable. I have had this one before, but never on this show. Lots of carbonation, a nice, thick, fluffy white head. A little bit less hop aroma than I'd like. But a nice, thick texture, and definitely hops that you can tell are right there in the front of your palate. Another good middle of the day beer, especially for hop heads, bitter hop heads that really do like the IPAs. And I'm going to take this opportunity to feed my producer.
Always keep the producer happy.
Always keep the producer happy, because the producer is the one that makes us look really pretty. A little bit of local beer news. We'd like to remind the Corvallis area that Block 15's taproom on Deschutes will be going back to their fall hours on October 1st. That's Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday from 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sunday will be 11:30 to 9 p.m., but good news. Sky High Brewing states they have no planned date to close the rooftop. They're going to be up there as long as you want to be up there. So stay up there as long as you can. Without further ado, let's jump into a bit of the meat of the interview here. Andrew, I've noticed specifically on Facebook that you've been really active in the community. What can you describe some of your activities for us?
Well, beyond the obvious of, going to the city council meetings and the work sessions, anytime I hear of an event in town, especially one that's being put on by the city that I think might be good for me to know about if I want to try and represent the people of Corvallis, if I have a chance to, I will go to. Like I saw you at the bike and pedestrian one down by the co-op, trying to deal with the new bike path. And, that's something that, I may only be representing officially Ward 9, but, the interests of everybody in Corvallis are still my concern. So just trying to get to know everything I can about this community, about the people who live here, so I can represent them as best as I am able.
Excellent. And Can you tell me what exactly is a work session for the
So a work
council?
session, there's actually something they just brought up a couple years ago. Uh, Before, and I actually just found out what it was like before at an informational session I went to yesterday. Uh, they used to have various little committees that had three counselors on them, and but then those committees would come up with an idea and present it to the full council. So at any given time, two-thirds of the council didn't really know what was going on. They just had to take the recommendation of this committee. Now, a work session is a little less formal of a thing where all nine counselors are present. City staff is present, and they talk about, okay, here's kind of the issues we're looking at, try and get all the nitty gritty debate and discussion out of the way in a less formal setting before going to the formal setting of the council meeting where they vote on it.
And is this something you'd like to continue, the work
Yes.
sessions? They
Yes,
feel
I
they're
think
productive?
yes, I definitely feel like they're productive, and they allow the entire council to be involved in the discussion instead of having three counselors just get together and say, okay, here's what we want to do on this particular issue, and then go to the full council and say, this is what the three of us think we should do, and then the other six go, oh, okay, yeah, and then they debate about it for a little bit during the meeting before making a decision. This way, a lot of the real nitty-gritty information gathering is done in presence of the full council.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Now, why did you choose to be a counselor and not another position such as mayor?
Well, for one, I don't think that somebody who has no prior experience being in municipal government would be a good fit for mayor, just because they don't necessarily know how the system works. In Corvallis, the mayor actually has very little power, and that's by design. Basically, the mayor's job is to just kind of set the agenda and chair the council. Which is, if you haven't been in the council yet, is something that's going to be really difficult to do. And so I'd rather focus on something a lot more local as just my ward than trying to jump all the way straight to mayor.
And do you have any plans for any further political offices?
At this moment, no. But obviously, things are always fluid. Let's focus on this and see if I can even get elected to this first before I even begin to think about anything else.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a good, strong feeling about your potential as a counselor?
Yeah, I do. Having been going to the meetings and everything for over a year, definitely got a feel for what the council deals with, how the meetings go, get a feel for what they face and how the whole system works, which means I think I'd be ready to hit the ground running come January when the new council is sworn
in. And I've read this on your website, but I'm not quite sure I completely understand it. You have 3 R's, which is restraint, reason, and respect.
Yes.
Can you please explain those in a little more detail?
So, restraint is, as we've discussed actually previously on Facebook, is about trying to help Corvallis live within its means and to prioritize its spending to where we're taking care of the things that are vital and important first before we start thinking about things that are nice. And the reason I used that word specifically was back in March when the council was deciding what to do with the new bond levy. I was the only one in attendance who urged restraint, who said if we go to the $1.70 level from the 82 cents we're at now, it's likely to fail. And then we're really going to be in trouble. If we could go to either keeping it at the 82 cents or bring it up to the $1.07 to where it's replacing another bond levy that's set to expire, so your tax rates don't actually go up, it would be a lot easier of a sell to the people of Corvallis. On that night, the council ignored me. They did not do that. They decided to go with the $1.70. A couple weeks later, city staff said, what do we do if it doesn't pass? And the council walked it back now to where it's going to be $1.07. Restraint, which is what I urged. Reason is, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Carefully consider all the options before making a decision. I don't want to jump into something, right off the bat, just off of how it makes me feel instinctually right there in the moment. I want to take a step back, look at it, look at what the potential unintended consequences are, and try to look at it from all angles as possible, so that way we can make the best decision that one can make with the information at hand. And then respect is what somebody once told me was called the platinum rule. We've all heard of the golden rule: treat others the way you would want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. So even though I know I am going to have disagreements with people, and probably most of the time I'm going to have disagreements with several members of the council, you know, they're still trying to do what they think is best for this community, and they still deserve to be treated with that level of respect. And so that's what I do. I came to Riley's defense online when she was facing a bunch of personal attacks. Even though I don't agree with most of her politics, I try to avoid going negative in my campaign, because even my opponent is trying to do what he thinks is best. So he deserves some respect for that. And everybody who's willing to take the time to step up and try and serve their community deserves some respect for that.
Excellent. Now, in response to the restraint, is there something Corvallis is spending too much money on right now?
There's not really any one thing. It's just more of kind of where our spending priorities are at. We're to the point where we are thinking about putting in a new taxing district to fund 911 services. We are to the point where we are wanting to increase fees on people's water services to pay for police and fire. And if we're to that point, if we're so broke that that's what we're having to do, we need to re-examine our priorities so that these vital services are not held hostage to bond levies, to taxing districts, to things where they could get voted down. So I want us to focus first on what is vital. These are the things like police, fire, roads, water, sewer, things like that, where if we don't have enough money for them and they don't happen, the city would literally fall apart. Then, if there's money left over, which there is, then we can go on to the things that are important. These are the things that many people rely on to get about their day, or to live their life, but that if we weren't able to provide them, the city would still, on the whole, be able to function. These are things like the library, the senior center, public transportation, parks. These are things that are important and that should be funded if the money is there, which, again, there is. And then if there's money left over after that, then we can go on to things that are nice, which is really just about everything else that the city does. And if there isn't enough money, then and only then should those services that are in the nice category go to the voters and try to explain why they are so important that they need to be paid for with tax dollars. But this way we don't have to worry every 4 or 5 years of, if you don't pass this bond levy, the library doesn't get money. If you don't pass this bond levy, we don't have enough money to give our police and fire departments everything they want. And, people of Corvallis are just sick and tired of basically having those services held over their heads like a guillotine and being coerced into voting for these higher taxes.
So one question, one issue I've had, even more than the homeless issue, is the jail. Do you think we need a new jail?
Absolutely. The one we have is too small. It's too obsolete. It needs to be done. I voted to have a new jail because that's one of those things that I do still believe that is a legitimate function of government. The one we have right now is it's woefully inadequate. It forces us to spend even more money to house inmates in other facilities across the state, including, I found out recently, at Norcor, which has a contract with ICE, and there are serious issues with that. So if we had a jail that was adequate here, we wouldn't have to worry about sending inmates all over the state.
And where would you propose building the new one? In its current position? Or would you advocate for renovating that one slightly and building a larger one somewhere else?
That's where it gets tricky. And that's what I've noticed the biggest opposition is everybody says, well, yes, we need a new jail, but they don't want it near me. I would leave the decision of where to put it to the experts, the people in the county, the people in the sheriff's department. They're the ones that know what is needed. I mean, yes, having it downtown right next to the courthouse underneath there, that would be great. But I'm pretty sure the costs of renovating and expanding that would be just simply prohibitive, especially since it's primarily underground. So, there, unfortunately, downtown isn't really a viable option. I would try to keep it as close to downtown, just that way it's easy for them to get to and from their court hearings. But as I said, I would leave that up to the experts in the sheriff's department and the county and whoever they hire. And as a city councilor, that would really not have any impact on us.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the homeless issue is part of the jail issue?
To an extent, there are other issues that kind of are intertwined, such as drug use and the war on drugs. Every time that I see an article on like the jail's website about, oh, hey, we had to release this violent person or whatever because we didn't have enough space, I go right to the jail roster and I see how many people are in there only for a drug offense. Nothing else. And it's like, well, if we stopped prosecuting drug crimes, then we'd have more space in the jail and we might not need to build as big a one. But, and then there's also a serious amount of failure to appears. People who get arrested for something minor and they don't go to their court date because, well, there's no space in the jail. There's no real consequence. We can talk about criminal justice reform and removing some of those misdemeanors off of the code. And so that way people who are homeless and are more likely to be subject to those aren't, and therefore they can stay out of the system and be more likely to be able to get their lives back on track if they so desire.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I have to switch a question. I'm gonna break away a little bit back to a previous question. You state on your website that you're a libertarian.
Yes.
How involved exactly do you want to be with our government? Maybe I should rephrase that. What types of issues do you not want to involve us in?
Like involve the government in?
Yeah. What is like for you is just not for our government to address?
Anything really in your private life, anything in your home. Basically, the core tenet of libertarianism is what's called the non-aggression principle. And best way we usually phrase it is don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. So I believe that you have the right to do whatever the heck you want with your life, your liberty, your property, your money, your body, anything that is yours that you want, as long as you are not infringing on somebody else's right to do the same or hurting anybody. So if you want to use drugs, that's not my deal, but go ahead. If you want to get stoned in your basement, that's nobody's business but yours. If you want to, marry 3 different people, that's nobody's business but yours. As long as you're not hurting anybody and everybody consents, it's none of the government's business.
So eminent domain is definitely not a tactic.
I hate eminent domain. I hate eminent domain. I consider it theft. I understand where the legal things behind it and that it has constitutional basis. But, if you don't want to sell your property, you should not be forced to. The analogy I use is, let's say I come to your house and I like your car and I decide to take it. And I give you, Kelly Blue Book value for it. I leave a bag full of cash on your doorstep. That's Blue Book value for your car. Did I steal it?
To me, yeah.
Exactly.
Didn't ask for it.
If you didn't want it, if you did not want to give it to me, if I said, hey, Linda, can I buy your car? You said no. That night, I came back, took it, and gave you fair market value for it. It's still stealing. Eminent domain to me is still stealing.
And how about things like cash bail? The cash system that we have in our justice system.
I actually, when I went to Dan Rayfield's forum recently on public safety, that was one of the things that came up, and that's something that's been coming up a lot lately in libertarian circles. And I think definitely that is something that needs to be reformed, because somebody should not be spending 3 years in prison for a minor offense before they even go to trial, just because they can't afford, $700 bail. I don't remember who it was. I think it was the Benton County District Attorney gave an example of, the judge, says, okay, somebody should be allowed to be out. I don't think that they're a danger to society, so I'm going to set the bail as low as I possibly can, and they only have to meet 10% of that. Well, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, even if 10% of the bail is only $75, you may not have $75 that you can just pop over to bail. And then you have to sit in prison. And then you miss work. And then you lose your job. And now you are in prison for a long time. You have a long employment gap, and it gets harder for you to be able to move on from something that was a really trivial offense in the first place. And conversely, you can have rich, well-off people who commit heinous crimes. And so the judge thinks, I don't want you to be out, so I'm going to set the bail as high as I can. And because you have the resources, you're able to post bail, and you can go out and you can skip bail, or you can commit another crime. I think bail, parole, probation, that sort of stuff should be based not on monetary resources, but more on character and the opinions of those that deal with quote unquote criminals every day and are able to better decide if somebody's a risk of reoffense while they wait for their trial.
That actually sounds it's really hard to poke holes in that logic. It really is. I'm gonna go a little bit easier now. Do you have any idea why we call our separate sections of our city wards? And I know Albany does this too. Why wards and not districts or boroughs or precincts?
I don't know. Well, the interesting thing is that to the state of Oregon, every single ward in Corvallis is a voting precinct. So the state calls them precincts, even though we call them wards. When it comes to like tabulating the votes, why we call them wards, I don't know. It's just what the city founders decided, 200 years ago. Hey, we're going to call these sections of the city wards. In Chicago, they call them alders. In New York, they call them boroughs. And, they just call them different things in different places. I don't think it really means that much. I mean, the
words themselves don't have an inherent meaning. They're just like labels.
Yep.
That we happen to stick on there. Okay. I guess that makes sense. So, do you know anything about the Corvallis 2020 vision statement at all?
I know a little bit about it. I've kind of skimmed over it a bit. It's something that sounds good in theory, but no government has ever been able to actually achieve these things at the time that they say they want to. But they're good goals to have. We want to be vibrant. We want to have a population of a certain amount. We want, income inequality to be reduced. And we all want it all by 2020. Well, okay, in 2004, that may have sounded doable. In 2018, not so much. That's why we've got the ICANN vision statement of 2040 coming up.
I haven't heard about that at all.
They've got ICANN, Imagine Corvallis Action Network, with their vision of 2040, very similar to the 2020 vision. They've got a launch set for Corvallis High School. Hold on, let me check my calendar.
Well, I know the new schools hopefully should be built by then.
Let's see. The ICANN launch is Tuesday, October 16th at 5:30 p.m. at Corvallis High School. And it's very similar to the Vision 2020 statement, but just, pushed out another 20 years.
So it's for you, that's kind of a fluffy kind of statement.
They're nice ideals to work for and plans to have, just to kind of keep as our overall goal as we move forward. But one thing that I have learned just through life and, being fascinated by and involved with politics and government is, it's really hard to plan more than one biennium in the future and even that is difficult. So, so many things can change even between now and 2020, that even if we were on track for several of those things, could derail them at a moment's notice. So, I understand the value, but to me, I think there's just kind of more guidelines, signposts of where we want to go than something that is actually going to be achievable in, especially now, the 2-year time frame.
So how far ahead should a political candidate attempt to plan for? Just their time span, or should they try to set up a base for somebody else to finish it?
You should definitely set up a base, because then you run into trouble of what makes sense short term isn't going to make sense long term. Best example of that is recently the city council voted against increasing the transportation services fee from $2 a month for a single family unit to $5 a month, for a single family house. Where if that had passed, yeah, we would have spent a little bit more money now, but we would have been able to have enough money to overcome the massive backlog we have in public works road repairs. Because sure, driving around town, you've seen a lot of our roads are in pretty poor shape. And over the course of, like 10, 15 years, it would have saved the city millions and millions of dollars. But in the short term, it didn't make sense because of all the other asks that the city is making of its citizens. So it got voted down, which, is short-sighted. I understand why, but it was short-sighted. So you definitely need to have these visions so you know where you're going and you can try and plan accordingly. But you also have to be flexible and know that, as the old saying goes, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
And speaking of roads, are the main roads we have 99? Are those main roads the responsibility of Corvallis, or are they responsibility of ODOT? And
depends on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask. If you ask ODOT, they're going to say, "Oh no, that's supposed to be Corvallis City government."
Yep, and if you ask Corvallis, they'll say, "No, that's supposed to be ODOT." 99.
We pay for it, right?
Oh yeah, we pay for it with our state gas tax. I would say, 99 and 34 and 20 being state highways should be primarily ODOT's responsibility. However, if they are unwilling or unable to uphold their side of the bargain in keeping those maintained, then we should be able to have the ability to fix them ourselves without having to jump through a bunch of ODOT's hoops.
But do we have equipment to do that?
Yeah. And if we don't, we do what we do right, like on Walnut Boulevard right now, is we just that they just finished repaving, which was desperately needed. They subcontracted it out to Knife River. So if the city doesn't have the equipment themselves to do it, you can always contract out to a private firm who probably does have the equipment or can quickly obtain it, and they can get the work done, and then the city just pays them back.
And where do bikes and bicyclists fit in with the road repair? Speaking from personal experience, I find that I get left out all too often with both the road repair and road cleaning. My tiny section of the road is frequently littered, and when they do patching, they never patch my part of the road. Am I as important as the vehicle drivers?
Yes, I think so, but from the cost benefit analysis of the bureaucrats in government, bikes don't pay gas taxes. Bikes, it comes back with the new transportation services fee, where it's the businesses and the houses that actually pay a flat fee to repair the roads. So hopefully things can change a little bit now, but this is a relatively recent development. Beforehand, it was just all gas taxes, and bikes don't pay gas taxes. So cars do. And there are more cars than there are bikes. So from the cost benefit side that a bureaucrat was looking at, bikes wouldn't matter that much. To me, they do matter. I used to ride my bike to school all the time. We need to account for that and have, separated bike lanes. Don't have you ride along the street, especially major street like 99, I would never ride my bike down that street if I could at all avoid it. I'd ride on the sidewalk. Laws be darned. We definitely need to approach bike safety from a new viewpoint to where we can have separate bike lanes from the roads, or at least have a curb or something to give a barrier to help increase bike safety.
And would you ever advocate for licensing bikes
I've thought about it.
to gain some of that money back?
I've thought about it, and I waver back and forth. For one, if there was, it would have to be, not necessarily on a bike itself, because is it fair to ask a 6-year-old if they have a license for their bike or registration for their bike? No. Maybe for an adult, but then how do you enforce it? And would the cost of enforcement be higher than whatever we would gain from the licensing fees? So while it's something that I think might be good in theory and definitely deserves a lot more, looking into research, I kind of don't really see that it's feasible. And that's just something that just needs to end up being incorporated into the cost of maintaining and fixing the roads, is we have to worry about bikes as well. And having, again, that transportation services fee that is billed to property owners, regardless of if they have a car or not, helps mitigate some of that and make sure that people, even if they don't own a car, are still, paying to help maintain the roads that they benefit from.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really not familiar with Ward 9. I'm way down here in Southtown, Ward 3. What some people can term the ghetto. What issues is Ward 9 facing?
Well, we had a minor issue with when they wanted to place the men's cold weather shelter here, on a last minute sprung on us thing. But beyond that, the biggest issue just lately has been the expansion of Samaritan. There's an annexation that just went through a couple months ago to expand north of Samaritan as they continue to grow. So that's just that kind of shows the privilege that we have up here in Northeast Corvallis, that our biggest issue is, what are we going to do with all this new housing and the expanding of the medical facilities that are right next to us? Beyond that, everything else is just the most common question I've got when I'm going around door to door is, what about the homeless shelter? What about the homeless shelter? Followed immediately by, are you a Democrat or Republican? Those are the two most common questions I get. So we're very fortunate up here in Northeast Corvallis that we don't seem to have some of the issues that other places of Corvallis have to deal with. And that's something that I definitely have to try and keep in mind as I'm going around talking to people, and they're like, well, I don't want the homeless shelter here. And I'm like, well, if we did it right, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I had no problem with placing the shelter next to the Pepsi plant if there had been neighborhood involvement and the right plan. The whole problem with the homeless shelter the entire way through was a lack of transparency in the process. It was sprung on downtown. Then it was sprung on us. Then it was sprung on Southtown. Nobody had any chance ahead of time to really try and talk about it, with the exception of downtown, as they were able to delay everything till we finally got the Hanson Tire Factory being the only place available, and the hand was forced. So, to go back to the original question, we don't really have major issues, but I definitely need to keep in mind what is going on in the rest of town, because I'm still going to have to vote on it. I'm going to have to vote on the homeless shelter. I'm going to have to vote on where we spend things in the urban renewal district, should that pass. So I need to definitely keep Southtown in my thoughts if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Mm-hmm. And where are you in the removal of Corvallis as a sanctuary city?
I absolutely oppose removing Corvallis as a sanctuary city. I also oppose Measure 105, removing Oregon as a sanctuary state. Ignoring anybody's opinions on immigration in general, or illegal immigration specifically, I look at it from not only a basic human decency point of view, but a constitutional rights point of view. The current law states that local communities cannot use resources in cooperation with ICE for somebody whose only crime, and I use the word crime, is being in the country illegally. This would remove that, allowing sheriffs, state police, local police to be able to do that. So how are you going to determine if somebody's only crime is being in the country illegally without massive, massive invasions of privacy and due process rights that are guaranteed by the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendment to all people in the United States, not citizens? The Constitution is very clear. Where they mean citizens, they say citizens. Where they mean people, they say people. And the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments all say the rights of people inside this country or inside these jurisdictions to have due process of law shall not be infringed. So I absolutely oppose removing our sanctuary city and sanctuary state status.
Thank you very much for explaining that. That I'm sure a lot of the listeners who are concerned about that will be able to take your words to heart. Now I know we just had that we just had the 28 facilities bond, which which approved schools being, I believe it was 3 schools being rebuilt. Lincoln Elementary. I'm not exactly sure which the other 2 were.
Shelblin, I think, up here in Ward 9. And maybe, I don't remember, maybe Harding? I'm not sure what the third one is, but I do remember Sheldon was one of them.
Really? Sheldon, when my son went there, it seemed already so good. What problems are there with Sheldon?
Well, it's the most, outside of Linus Pauling, I think it was the most recent one that was built. And that was a while ago. Just a second, I'm trying to pull up the Corvallis school bond. Try and pull it up here, see what it said. 28 facilities bond. Bond program. Procedure, details. Wow, so actually it looks like they were wanting to do a bunch of stuff. They want to do stuff with Adams, Garfield, Hoover, Jefferson, Lincoln, Mountain View, Wilson, Franklin, Sheldon, Linus Pauling, CHS, CV, and College Hill. They were wanting to do stuff with all of them.
Well, I know Lincoln Elementary definitely needs an entire rebuild. The whole thing is just really messy.
Yes. I think Sheldon just needed improve emergency lighting, ADA accessibility, replace bleachers in the gym, renovate the classroom to create a STEM lab, renovate the library. So nothing like super major, but all of the schools had
resurfacing and a bit of mechanical infrastructure for electrical, heating, and plumbing. Oh, okay. And renovate the restrooms, because what student wouldn't love a new restroom? When I was a student, restrooms in the 70s and 80s, restrooms were a nightmare, because I never felt I had the least little bit of privacy in a school restroom at all. There were these stalls that were like, they had these cracks like 6 inches wide, and anybody could look into them. It was terrible, and I never wanted to go into them. By today's standards, CHS is a beautiful school.
Yes, I went to
very comfortable. And my son, having gone through the Corvallis school system, Lincoln Elementary was a bit of a challenge, but Sheldon staff, I really appreciated the time the Sheldon staff took to actually look into some of the issues that children were having, to really try to give a personal touch to their learning experience, which is really nice. Do you support a lot of like the personalized learning programs?
Yes, I believe, and that's, as we've again talked about on Facebook before, I support, and I realize I'm in the minority and it's never going to happen, at least not anytime soon. I've even talked with Dan Rayfield about it, repealing measures 5 and 50, and which would allow local communities, to have more control over their schooling than they do right now. We gave all that power back to Salem. Well, not back to Salem. We gave it all to Salem in the first place. And while that's been great for school districts in places that were struggling, it's really hurt places like Corvallis. And I think that the people that are best suited to know what our children need are the parents and the teachers and the administrators that interact with them on a daily basis. And so I am all for personalizing education to each individual child. I am all for increasing school choice. So that way, if you live in an area that has a school that is not performing well, you should be able to send them to another school nearby at no charge. To make sure that they can get a quality education. Fortunately, here in Corvallis lately, and the school board's been working really hard on this, is at any school in Corvallis now, you're pretty assured that your child is going to get a good education. But your child's education should not depend on your zip code. So anything that makes it more individualized, that helps our children succeed, is something that I can probably get behind.
And not to get too personal, but actually individualizing a child's education creates the potential for parents to push their children more into a religious education. Where should that line be drawn, do you think?
And
should they be allowed to do that, or should it remain like a scientifically based education system?
I would say as long as tax dollars aren't being used, and that's where I draw the line on like school choice, is sending your child and using tax dollars to send them to a religious school, because then you really start to blur the line of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment. And then you have other people like, well, my tax dollars are going to something I don't agree with. And, trust me, that's a big thing among us libertarians, is tax dollars going to things we don't agree with. You definitely start to get into some real gray areas. So in terms of school choice, I would prevent, you being able to send your child at taxpayer expense to a religious school. But if you want to do it at your own expense, make sure that that school at least is meeting some of the basic requirements for reading, writing, math, general science. But beyond that, it's kind of up to the parents. And, you really start to get into some gray areas that the state says, well, you can raise your child the way you want, except where we say you have to raise them this way. That gets a little icky for me. So, again, if you want to pay for it out of your own pocket and send your child to a religious school, like say St. Anne Christian. When I was in California, I went to a Christian school through third grade. I think I turned out okay. I'm not trying to impose Bible beliefs on anybody. Then that's your prerogative as a parent.
So is there anything else you'd really like our audience to know that you're thinking about, or that we haven't discussed?
Just put out my endorsements there. I've been endorsed by State Senator Sarah Gelser. I've been endorsed by the chair of the Corvallis School Board, Vince Adams. I've been endorsed by the Willamette Association of Realtors. So I can definitely draw support from a broad range of ideologies and people and beliefs, because freedom is popular. Most people want to be able to live their life how they see fit with minimal outside interference. I completely support that. So, I've got those endorsements. I can work with anybody. And for the last year, I've basically been doing the job. I've been going to the meetings. I've been going to the work sessions. I've reached out to people in Ward 9 about their concerns and have brought those concerns to the council. So if you want experience, especially since it's between me and another guy, because the current counselor is retiring, so you're going to have a new council in Ward 9 regardless. Having a guy that's been putting in the work for a year is probably going to be the best bet.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you one last question. I ask a fun question to every single person I interview. I hope I got this right for you. If we needed to send an animal representative to another inhabited planet, would you send a cat, or a dog?
Do we like this planet?
Yes. Yes. We're friends with them. It's friendly. Yeah.
Then
A
I send them a
dog?
dog.
Why? Why a dog? And like, are cats just too,
I
imperious?
have both a cat and a dog. If we send a cat, it'll probably end up getting them to worship him. Whereas a dog, loves everybody. My dog is an absolute sweetie, and it's like, oh, hello, people. Are you my new best friend? Do you have nummies for me? So if we're trying to put our best foot forward and how, hey, we're not that bad species. Look at this animal that we've domesticated that absolutely adores everybody. Please don't, come and enslave us. Then I would definitely choose a dog.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Hold on. Come here, Harper. Come here. This is Harper.
Oh, what is it? Oh.
She is a bit of a mutt. We did DNA testing on her, and they said she's 25% Husky, 1/8 Brittany Spaniel, 1/8 Cocker Spaniel, and the other 50% was mixed breed. And we're like, so glad we paid you $84 for you to tell us something we already knew. I'm pretty sure she's part Collie, and maybe some.
She does look collie because she's got that lovely golden coloring with the white stripe down her long muzzle.
Yep. And she has a disease called megaesophagus, so her esophagus doesn't work, so she has to sit and eat her food in a special chair that holds her upright for 30 minutes. It's a bit of a challenge, but we love her, and she's adapted pretty well to it.
Oh, that's so sweet of you to actually, to take the time for your pet. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for coming and talking to us today. We really do appreciate, especially the citizens of Corvallis being able to listen from the comfort of their own homes.
That is helpful.
And we will make sure to include all appropriate links to you and your website and everything. Well, guys, it's been great talking. This has been episode 48 of Beery Good Entertainment. We've been talking to Andrew Freborg, candidate for Councilor of Ward 9 here in Corvallis, Oregon. Andrew is endorsed by State Senator Sarah Gelser, Corvallis School Board President Vince Adams, and the Willamette Association of Realtors. This is the third local politics episode we've done in Corvallis. If you would like an opportunity to be interviewed, please let us know. You can reach us at beerygood@gmail.com, S0RCERESS0, that's sorceress 0 @gmail.com, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BeeryGE. Please feel free to pass this episode along to your friends and family, especially your voting age children. Our message here at Beery Good Entertainment is clear. #PleaseVote.